Ancient voices whisper to us across the centuries, carrying fragments of wisdom from civilizations long gone. These weren't just empty ceremonies, they were living bridges between humanity and the mysteries of existence. Hidden beneath layers of time lie spiritual practices so powerful they shaped entire cultures, yet so secretive they nearly vanished without a trace. What really happened during the sacred rites of Eleusis? Why did the Oracle of Delphi send kings trembling to their knees, and what forbidden knowledge was guarded by the initiates of ancient mystery schools? The answers might surprise you, because these weren't mere superstitions, they were sophisticated systems of consciousness transformation that modern science is only beginning to understand. Today we're dusting off these forgotten rituals, piecing together their startling secrets, and discovering why they still matter in our disconnected modern world. You're about to see history's spiritual dimension in a completely new light. Long before cities rose and empires took shape, humanity's first spiritual impulses emerged from an intimate dance with nature. Picture a prehistoric shaman standing beneath a sky ablaze with stars, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath bare feet. This was where sacred rituals began. Early humans didn't separate spirituality from survival. Every hunt, harvest, and changing season carried divine significance. The earliest traces appear in cave paintings dating back 40,000 years, handprints pressed against stone walls, animal figures half hidden in flickering firelight. These weren't just art, they were portals. Ancient hunters believed depicting their prey could summon its spirit, ensuring a successful hunt. By the time Mesopotamia's ziggurats pierced the horizon, these primal instincts had evolved into complex ceremonies. Temple priests in Sumer decoded celestial patterns, believing the gods spoke through planetary movements. What's fascinating is how similar ideas appeared across unconnected cultures. Whether it was Australian Aboriginal songlines or the sweat lodges of Native American tribes, certain patterns repeat: purification rituals, sacred plants altering consciousness, and journeys to spirit worlds. The common thread, a universal human yearning to touch something greater than ourselves. Even today, science confirms what these ancients sensed, that rhythmic drumming, chanting, and certain natural compounds can shift brainwaves into transcendent states. But these practices weren't static. As societies shifted from nomadic tribes to agricultural cities, rituals transformed too. Fertility goddesses gained prominence as crops became central to survival. The Eleusinian mysteries in Greece wove agricultural cycles into rites promising rebirth. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the Nile's predictable floods shaped a spirituality obsessed with cycles of death and renewal. Geography didn't just influence spiritual practices, it practically designed them. Yet the most enduring mystery isn't just how these rituals began, but why they resonated so deeply across millennia. Perhaps they answered questions we're still asking. What lies beyond? How do we find meaning in chaos? The answers might be hidden in the very bones of these ancient traditions. For early civilizations, nature wasn't just the backdrop of spiritual life. It was the divine, alive and pulsing with sacred energy. Imagine standing in a Neolithic forest where every rustling leaf carried a message from the gods, where rivers spoke in rushing whispers and mountains loomed like sleeping deities. This wasn't mythology to them, it was reality. From the sun-worshipping Zoroastrians of Persia to the tree-dwelling Druids of Celtic Europe, cultures worldwide saw nature as the ultimate teacher. Solstice celebrations weren't mere festivals, they were vital rituals to coax the sun back from winter's grip. Native American rain dances weren't performances but desperate, sacred negotiations with the skies. In Japan, Shinto shrines still mark places where kami spirits of rocks, waterfalls, and ancient trees are believed to dwell. What's striking is how precisely these rituals mirrored humanity's survival needs. The Egyptian priesthood timed Nile flood rituals with astronomical precision because lives depended on it. The Inuit honored seal spirits before hunts, acknowledging the fragile balance between life and death. Even animal totems, wolves, eagles, bears, weren't just symbols but guides embodying traits tribes needed to survive. Modern science reveals something astonishing. These rituals often worked, just not in the way we'd expect. Studies show Amazonian tribes using sacred plant medicines could predict weather shifts days in advance, a skill honed through generations of ecological observation disguised as spirituality. The rhythmic pounding of rain dances, it may have triggered a collective focus that actually heightened hunters' sensitivity to approaching storms. Yet beneath the practicality lay something deeper, a humility we've lost. These cultures didn't see themselves as nature's masters, but as threads in its vast tapestry. The Druids forbade cutting certain trees without weeks of prayer. Hindu texts describe rivers as goddesses whose pollution would bring societal collapse. Compare that to today's environmental crises, and it's hard not to wonder, did ancient people understand something we've forgotten? Perhaps their greatest lesson wasn't in how they worshipped nature, but in how they listened to it. Before calendars, they read seasons in birds' migrations. Before microscopes, they knew certain plants healed because the land itself seemed to offer them up. In our age of concrete and screens, that intimate dialogue has faded, but the earth still speaks if we're willing to hear it. Among the most enduring and widespread of humanity's spiritual traditions lies the shaman, a figure both feared and revered, who danced along the razor's edge between worlds. Unlike priests in temples or monks in monasteries, shamans operated in the liminal spaces, caves where echoes whispered back strangely, forests where mist blurred the line between earth and sky. From the frozen tundras of Siberia to the steamy jungles of the Amazon, these intermediaries shared one startling trait. They claimed to step outside ordinary reality, returning with knowledge that healed bodies, foretold disasters, and soothed lost souls. What set shamans apart wasn't just their role, but how they achieved it. Rhythmic drumming, a heartbeat's steady pulse amplified, could shift consciousness within minutes. Studies now show this isn't mere superstition. The brain responds to repetitive drumbeats by altering its waves, easing into trance states similar to deep meditation. Chanting served a dual purpose. The vibrations resonated within the body while the words themselves carried power. In Mongolia, throat singing created harmonics that shamans described as the sound of creation humming back to itself. Then there were the sacred plants carefully guarded by tradition. The Amazon's ayahuasca vine wasn't just a drug, it was a teacher, brewed only under a shaman's guidance after years of apprenticeship. Siberian shamans ingested fly agaric mushrooms, enduring grueling nausea to reach visions they believed held cures. What's striking is how these diverse cultures separated by continents arrived at similar methods. Whether through pain, exhaustion, or ecstasy, the goal was always the same: to shatter the illusion that this world is all there is. Yet shamanism wasn't about escapism. A successful journey meant nothing unless it brought back something useful: a diagnosis for illness, a warning of drought, or a strategy for hunting. In many tribes, the shaman's authority hinged on tangible results. Failed too often, and the community would seek another guide. This accountability kept the practice grounded, weaving spirituality into the fabric of survival. Today, neuroscientists are catching up with what shamans knew millennia ago. Brain scans during rituals reveal heightened activity in areas linked to empathy and insight, while decreased activity in the default mode network, the part of us obsessed with ego and time, suggests why trances feel so liberating. Modern therapists now borrow drumming techniques for trauma treatment, and psychedelic research echoes ancient claims about plant medicines unlocking hidden corners of the mind. Perhaps the shaman's true legacy isn't in the rituals themselves, but in the radical idea that reality is far more fluid than it appears. In an age where science and spirituality often clash, these ancient practitioners remind us that some truths can't be measured, only experienced. And that tension between the seen and unseen still tugs at the human spirit, as powerfully now as it did beneath the flickering firelight of a Paleolithic cave. To the ancient Egyptians, death wasn't an end, it was a doorway, a perilous journey through cosmic courts, demon-filled deserts, and final judgment before emerging into paradise. Their entire civilization seemed to revolve around this single truth, that life was fleeting, but the soul went on forever. And if ever a culture mastered the art of preparing for eternity, it was along the banks of the Nile. At the heart of their spiritual technology lay mummification, not merely preserving a body, but reconstructing it as a vessel for the soul's return. Organs were carefully stored in sacred jars, each protected by a deity. The brain was discarded as useless, while the heart believed to hold a person's essence was left in place. Why? Because in the Hall of Judgment, the god Anubis would weigh this heart against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth. A heavy heart burdened by wrongdoing would be devoured, dooming the soul to oblivion. Yet physical preservation was only the beginning. Hidden within tomb walls and folded beside mummies lay the Book of the Dead, a spellbook disguised as a guide. Its incantations weren't prayers but survival tactics, how to outwit demons, recite secret names of gatekeepers, and even turn into a heron to escape danger. Some spells warned, "Do not let my heart oppose me in the tribunal," revealing a deep anxiety about the soul's own honesty under divine scrutiny. What's often overlooked is how personal these rituals were. Wealthy nobles commissioned elaborate sarcophagi, but even farmers scraped together coins for cheap papyrus copies of the Afterlife guide. Hierarchy didn't vanish in death. Pharaohs became gods, nobles kept their status, and workers hoped for peaceful fields, but everyone faced the same trials. This democratization of immortality suggests something profound. For Egyptians, the afterlife wasn't just a reward, it was a right earned through knowledge, preparation, and moral balance. Modern archaeology hints that these practices may have served a psychological purpose too. The meticulous care given to burials suggests a culture that processed grief through ritual, transforming fear of death into a grand adventure. When tomb robbers later stripped gold and jewels, they missed the point entirely. The real treasure was never the objects, but the unshakable belief that existence continued beyond the grave. Perhaps that's why these mysteries still captivate us. In an age of fleeting digital legacies, the Egyptian vision feels startlingly bold, a civilization that refused to accept oblivion, dedicating centuries to perfecting the art of eternity. Their rituals whisper a challenge. If death is inevitable, why not face it with preparation, courage, and even wonder? Beneath the emerald canopies of ancient Europe's sacred groves, the Druids orchestrated rituals so profound, their secrets died with them. These weren't mere priests, they were living libraries, human conduits between earth and cosmos. Unlike the Egyptians with their papyri or the Mesopotamians with their cuneiform, the Celts entrusted their entire spiritual legacy to memory alone. Every solstice calculation, every healing herb's property, every incantation, all preserved through generations of whispered training. And that deliberate secrecy makes unraveling their practices today like reconstructing a song from its echo. Take Stonehenge, a monument older than the Druids themselves, yet adopted by them as a celestial compass. Those towering stones aren't just arranged for show. Their precision placed to frame the summer solstice sunrise, bathing the altar in golden light for just a few sacred minutes each year. Similar alignments appear across Europe. In Ireland's Newgrange, where dawn pierces a narrow passage only on the winter solstice, or in holly groves where moonlight struck specific trees during lunar eclipses. This wasn't primitive astronomy. It was a sacred science where the movements of heavens dictated everything from planting seasons to the timing of royal coronations. Oak trees held particular reverence, their gnarled branches believed to channel divine energy. Pliny the Elder wrote of white-robed Druids harvesting mistletoe with golden sickles during specific moon phases, a ritual so exact a single misstep could void its power. The irony, while outsiders saw nature worship, the Druids were likely tracking ecological patterns we'd now call sustainability. Cutting mistletoe in winter ensured the host tree's survival. Rituals at river sources coincided with spawning seasons, protecting fish populations. Even their infamous Wicker Man sacrifices, if they occurred at all, may have symbolized the cyclical return of nutrients to the soil. What survives today are fragments, folk remedies involving oak bark, the persistent myth of Merlin as a Druid archetype, even the modern obsession with four-leaf clovers, once considered portals to the other world. But perhaps their greatest legacy is the underlying philosophy that every leaf, star, and season is interconnected. Modern pagans revived these ideas, yet the original Druids would likely chuckle at our clumsy attempts. Theirs wasn't a spirituality of weekend festivals, but a lifelong immersion in nature's rhythms, an unbroken dialogue with forces we've since silenced with concrete and screens. The tragedy isn't just that Rome's conquest erased their oral tradition, but that we'll never know what insights perished with them. Were their solstice alignments teaching tools for navigation or gateways to altered states? Did their tree rituals encode forgotten botany? One thing's certain. In a world where we've traded starlight for streetlights, the Druids' most radical act wasn't secrecy. It was remembering that the universe speaks if we're willing to listen. In the golden glow of sacred flames, Vedic priests once stood as cosmic architects, their chants not mere words, but tools to sustain the universe itself. Ancient India's fire rituals, known as yajnas, weren't just ceremonies. They were a spiritual technology designed to harmonize human life with the rhythms of creation. Picture the scene: a precisely constructed altar, fires crackling with ghee offerings, priests reciting Sanskrit verses with mathematical precision, every syllable believed to vibrate through the fabric of reality. At the heart of these rituals was Agni, the fire god who served as messenger between worlds. Unlike other deities who demanded worship from afar, Agni was present in every hearth and sacrifice, a living bridge between mortals and the divine. The Rigveda's hymns reveal astonishing details: how fire altars were built in fractal-like patterns mirroring cosmic geometry, how specific woods released different energies when burned, even how the timing of offerings aligned with planetary movements. This wasn't superstition. It was an intricate science of interconnection where a priest's mistake in pronunciation could theoretically disrupt nature's balance. What set Vedic practices apart was their dual focus: outer ritual and inner transformation. While priests performed elaborate external ceremonies, parallel texts like the Upanishads explored the metaphorical inner yajna, where breath became sacred smoke and meditation became the true offering. This duality seeded ideas that would later blossom into Hinduism's diverse paths: the devotional fervor of bhakti, the disciplined focus of yoga, even the non-dual realizations of Advaita Vedanta. Traces echo further east to Buddhist mantra recitations and Jainism's emphasis on ahimsa, non-harm. Both grew from this same ritual-rich soil. Modern science now catches glimpses of what the Vedic seers intuited. Studies on sound frequencies show how Sanskrit chants can affect brainwave patterns, while the physics of sacred geometry reveals why certain altar shapes might amplify energy. More profound still is the ecological wisdom embedded in these rites. Offerings were always biodegradable. Fires used renewable fuels, and the entire system reflected a worldview where humans weren't conquerors of nature, but participants in its delicate dance. Yet the true legacy of these fire rituals isn't in their mechanics, but in their radical premise, that human actions, words, thoughts, even the tending of a flame, could ripple across the cosmos. In an age of climate crises and social fragmentation, this ancient vision of interconnected responsibility feels less like mythology and more like urgent wisdom waiting to be rediscovered. High atop tiered pyramids wreathed in copal incense, Mayan priests performed rituals so potent they could allegedly pierce the veil between worlds. This wasn't mere pageantry. Every drop of blood spilled, every star chart etched into bark paper held cosmic significance. The Maya didn't just worship their gods, they forged active partnerships through ceremonies blending precise astronomy with startling physical sacrifice. At the heart of their spiritual technology lay two seemingly contradictory forces, celestial mathematics and visceral bloodletting. While European scholars later dismissed blood rituals as barbaric, the Maya saw them as sacred currency. Rulers like Lady Zoc of Yaxchilan would draw stingray spines through their tongues, letting blood-soaked paper strips later burned a smoky offering carrying prayers straight to the spirit realm. Modern archaeology reveals these acts weren't random violence. They followed precise calendars, timed with planetary alignments believed to amplify their power. Parallel to these blood rites flourished an astronomical prowess unmatched in the ancient world. Their observatories weren't just buildings but living instruments, doorways in stone framing Venus's 8-year cycle or the moon's subtle wobbles. The Dresden Codex, a surviving bark paper book, contains Venus tables accurate to 2 hours over 5 centuries. Such precision wasn't for agriculture alone. It dictated when to wage war, always when Venus was high, when to crown kings, even which days were favorable for bloodletting. The cosmos and the body were one interconnected system. Nowhere was this fusion clearer than in the sacred ball game, where players ricocheted a heavy rubber ball off hip pads through stone hoops. Far from sport, it reenacted the myth of the hero twins battling underworld gods, the ball symbolizing the sun's perilous journey through darkness. Losing teams' sacrifices, whether symbolic or literal remains debated, mirrored the gods' own sacrifices to sustain creation. The court itself was a microcosm, flat as the earth, flanked by sloping walls representing the sky, hoops positioned at celestial markers. What unsettles modern scholars isn't the Mayas' savagery, but their sophistication. Their 819-day calendar cycle encodes planetary synchronicities we've only recently calculated with computers. Temples at Tikal align not just to solstices, but to the subtle wanderings of Jupiter, a planet they associated with divine kingship. Even their infamous Doomsday 2012 prophecy was likely mistranslated. Evidence suggests it marked not an apocalypse, but a rare galactic alignment ushering in a new spiritual age. Perhaps their greatest lesson lies in the refusal to separate science from spirit. Where we see blood and stars as opposites, the Maya saw them as threads in the same sacred tapestry, one that wove together mathematics, agony, ecstasy, and the turning heavens. In an era where we've sterilized astronomy into data points and exiled ritual to the realm of superstition, their legacy whispers a provocative question. What cosmic truths might we be missing by keeping the empirical and the numinous in separate boxes? Deep in the shadow of Mount Parnassus, where sulfurous vapors curled from the earth like ghostly fingers, one of antiquity's most astonishing rituals unfolded. Pilgrims from across the ancient world, kings, merchants, desperate farmers, climbed the sacred way to Delphi, hearts pounding with questions only the gods could answer. At the temple's heart sat the Pythia, Apollo's chosen vessel, perched on a tripod above a fissure in the rock. As intoxicating gases rose from below, she would slip into a trance, her rasping voice delivering prophecies in riddles that shaped wars, founded colonies, and haunted rulers' dreams. This wasn't mere fortune-telling. The Pythia's rituals followed meticulous protocols: a 3-day fast, purification in the Castalian spring, sacrifices of barley and laurel leaves. Even the timing was precise. Consultations occurred only on the 7th day of each warm month, when Apollo's influence was strongest. The cryptic responses, "You will go, you will return, never in war will you perish," forced seekers to confront their own interpretations, turning prophecy into a mirror for the soul. Modern geology confirms the temple sat atop intersecting fault lines, likely releasing ethylene gas, a substance known to induce euphoric trances. To the Greeks, this wasn't coincidence. It was proof the gods had marked Delphi as a threshold between worlds. Beyond the oracle, Greeks lived in a landscape humming with divine signals. A flock of birds altering course mid-flight became an omen from Zeus. The entrails of sacrificed animals, liver lobes irregular, gallbladder swollen, spoke hidden warnings. Even dreams held coded messages, with temples like the Asclepian offering incubation rituals where the sick slept, awaiting healing visions. What fascinates isn't just the belief in these signs, but their democratization. Unlike Egypt's elite-focused afterlife rituals, Delphi's priests charged fees based on income. A soldier's question weighed as heavily as a king's, provided he brought the proper offering. The psychological brilliance of these practices emerges when we see them as ancient therapy. A general torn between war and diplomacy didn't just get an answer at Delphi. He underwent a weeks-long pilgrimage, confronting his fears along treacherous mountain paths. The ambiguous responses forced introspection. Was a wooden wall, literal ships, or metaphorical patience? Societally, oracles acted as pressure valves. Colonists unsure where to sail, families cursed by unexplained deaths, cities plagued by strife, all could appeal to a higher authority, preventing chaos through shared faith in divine arbitration. Today, we dismiss omens as superstition, yet we still crave certainty: horoscopes, algorithms predicting our behavior, even the placebo effect of medical rituals. The Greeks understood something we often forget. That uncertainty is unbearable without frameworks to give it meaning. Their genius lay in weaving divination into the fabric of daily life, transforming fear of the unknown into a dialogue with the cosmos. In an age of data overload but spiritual famine, perhaps the whisper of the Pythia still echoes. True wisdom begins when we admit how much we cannot know. Under endless skies on windswept plains, a solitary figure stands motionless atop a solitary hill. No food, no shelter, just the crushing weight of expectation and the whispered promise of revelation. This was the Native American vision quest, a rite of passage so profound it could shape a person's entire existence. Unlike modern coming-of-age milestones, these weren't celebrations with cake and gifts. They were grueling spiritual trials where seekers confronted their deepest fears and emerged, if they emerged at all, forever changed. At first glance, the structure seems simple. A young person, often on the cusp of adulthood, would travel alone to a remote place, fasting for days while praying for guidance. But beneath the surface lay meticulous preparation. Elders didn't just send youths blindly into the wilderness. They trained them for months, teaching sacred songs, survival skills, and most crucially, how to interpret the visions that would come. The quest itself wasn't a test of endurance, but of surrender. Without the distractions of community, fire, or even speech, the seeker became a hollow reed, waiting for the universe to breathe meaning into them. What makes these quests extraordinary is how intensely personal they were, yet how universally structured. Across tribes, from the Lakota to the Ojibwe, certain symbols recurred: the appearance of animal spirits, thunderstorms as divine messages, or dreams so vivid they bled into waking life. A Cheyenne youth might return with a vision of the buffalo, signaling a future as a provider. A Hopi seeker could meet Spider-Woman, hinting at a destiny as a storyteller or healer. But these weren't passive hallucinations, they were contracts. If a vision showed a warrior carrying an eagle feather, neglecting to honor that sign could invite misfortune. The quest didn't just reveal destiny, it demanded accountability. Modern psychology offers intriguing parallels. Studies on sensory deprivation show how isolation can trigger heightened creativity and self-awareness, while fasting's effects on brain chemistry may explain the clarity many seekers described. Yet indigenous traditions went further, framing these physiological changes as sacred dialogue. The sweat lodge purifications beforehand weren't just about cleansing the body, they represented shedding childhood skin. The 4-day fast mirrored the 4 sacred directions, weaving the individual's struggle into the cosmos's rhythm. Perhaps the most radical aspect was the quest's emotional honesty. Unlike cultures that masked rites of passage with bravado, native traditions acknowledged the terror of transformation. Seekers often wept, trembled, or even fainted, and that was expected. Vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was the fertile soil where revelation took root. In an era where we chase constant distraction, these ancient rituals whisper a counterintuitive truth. That true direction is found not in noise, but in the terrifying, luminous silence of our own solitude. What survives today isn't just the practice. Some tribes still conduct vision quests, but its underlying wisdom. The notion that adulthood isn't bestowed by age, but earned through ordeal. That nature speaks in symbols to those patient enough to listen. And that sometimes the most important journey isn't across mountains, but into the uncharted wilderness within. Deep beneath candlelit vaults, where the scent of mercury and molten metals hung thick in the air, medieval alchemists performed rituals that blurred the line between science and sacrament. Their quest wasn't merely to turn lead into gold, it was to transform the human soul itself. Hidden behind cryptic symbols and coded manuscripts lay a spiritual roadmap, one that used the language of chemistry to describe the most profound inner metamorphosis. Take the iconic magnum opus, the great work, which alchemists described in 4 stages, each mirroring psychological transformation. Negrido, the blackening, represented the breakdown of ego like ore crushed in a mortar before purification. Albedo, the whitening, symbolized purification through struggle, where the soul shed its attachments like dross from smelted silver. Citrinitas, the yellowing, hinted at the dawning of wisdom, while rubido, the reddening, marked the final union of spirit and matter. The moment a flawed human became, in their terms, a golden being. Modern psychology echoes this eerily. Carl Jung would later recognize these stages as archetypes of personal growth, proving alchemists weren't just working with flasks, they were mapping the subconscious. Their tools were as symbolic as their texts. The Athana, a self-feeding furnace, wasn't just for heating metals, it represented the sustained focus needed for spiritual discipline. The serpent eating its own tail, the Ouroboros, wasn't decoration. It embodied eternity and the cyclical nature of inner work. Even their obsession with the philosopher's stone wasn't about wealth. This mythical substance, often described as a powder that could perfect base materials, was likely a metaphor for enlightenment itself, the elusive catalyst that turns the leaden weight of human frailty into the gold of self-realization. What's often overlooked is how alchemy bridged 2 worlds. In an era when the church frowned on direct spiritual exploration, alchemists smuggled mystical ideas into laboratories. A recipe for purifying antimony might secretly describe meditation techniques. A diagram of intertwined dragons could encode breathing exercises. This duality saved them from persecution after all. Who would suspect that a man boiling sulfur was actually practicing a form of prayer? Today, chemistry remembers alchemy as its superstitious ancestor, but that misses the point. These seekers weren't primitive scientists, they were pioneers of a third path where material and spiritual truths intertwined. When we dismiss their bubbling flasks as mere proto-chemistry, we ignore their real legacy, the audacious belief that every human contains the potential for radical transformation, not just of elements but of the self. The ancient world held its deepest spiritual truths behind closed doors, literally. Among olive groves just outside Athens, thousands journeyed to Eleusis for rites so secret, revealing them carried a death penalty. This wasn't just another temple. The Eleusinian mysteries promised something revolutionary, a direct, transformative encounter with the divine. Unlike public sacrifices where spectators watched from a distance, initiates here became protagonists in a sacred drama that reshaped their very understanding of life and death. What set these mystery cults apart was their emphasis on personal experience over dogma. For over 1,000 years, from the Bronze Age to Roman times, participants underwent elaborate preparations, fasting by the sea, handling sacred objects in darkness, and drinking a barley potion called kykeon. Then came the climax, a night-long ritual in the Telesterion, where torchlight flickered on wall paintings depicting Persephone's descent into the underworld and her triumphant return. Archaeological evidence suggests the potion may have contained ergot, a fungus with psychoactive properties, hinting that initiates didn't just hear about rebirth, they felt it coursing through their veins. Yet Eleusis was just one thread in a tapestry of secret rites across antiquity. In Egypt, the cult of Isis reenacted her resurrection of Osiris, offering initiates a preview of the afterlife. Followers of Mithras, popular among Roman soldiers, met in underground chambers mimicking cosmic battles, their rituals blending Persian astrology with Roman discipline. The common thread: these weren't passive worshippers but active participants in narratives that promised liberation, from fear, from mortality, even from societal constraints. Their influence rippled far beyond temple walls. The concept of personal salvation, that ordinary people could commune with the divine without royal or priestly intermediaries, laid groundwork for Christianity's spread centuries later. Paul himself echoed mystery cult language when writing of being born again, while early Christian baptismal rites mirrored the secrecy and staged revelations of Eleusis. Even their symbols persisted. The sheaf of wheat displayed at Eleusis, representing cyclical renewal, found parallels in the Eucharistic bread of later faiths. What fascinates most isn't just the rituals themselves, but why they resonated so deeply. In a world of plagues, wars, and uncertainty, these cults offered more than comfort. They gave agency. Where state religions demanded obedience to distant gods, mysteries empowered initiates with first-hand knowledge of the sacred. Modern seekers still chase that same promise through retreats, psychedelics, and immersive rituals, proof that the human hunger for direct transcendence hasn't faded. The real secret of Eleusis, that the most powerful spiritual experiences aren't just witnessed, they're lived. Beneath the sprawling branches of ancient baobab trees, communities gather not just to remember their ancestors, but to commune with them. Across Africa's diverse spiritual landscape, the departed aren't relics of the past. They're living participants in daily life, their wisdom flowing through drumbeats, dreams, and the quiet rustle of sacred groves. This isn't ancestor worship, it's ancestor partnership, a dynamic dialogue sustaining the thread between generations. Take the Akan people of Ghana, where elaborate stools carved for revered leaders become sacred objects after their passing. These aren't mere memorials. During rituals, libations of water or palm wine poured over the stools hydrate the ancestors, inviting their guidance into community decisions. Meanwhile, the Zulu of southern Africa practice Ukubaisa, a ceremony where ancestors are literally brought home through chanting, dancing, and the sacrifice of a white cow. Its purity believed to open a path between worlds. These traditions reveal a radical idea that death doesn't sever relationships, it transforms them. Divination practices like the Yoruba's Ifa system take this further, treating ancestors as active problem solvers. A Babalawo priest tosses palm nuts or chains, interpreting their patterns as messages from the spirit realm. But here's the twist: the answers aren't cryptic, they're practical, addressing everything from marital strife to crop rotation. This reflects a spirituality grounded in tangible outcomes, where the sacred and mundane intertwine seamlessly. What startles Western observers most is the communal nature of these rituals. An individual doesn't mourn alone, the village mourns with them. When sickness strikes, the whole community investigates whether an offended ancestor might be the cause. Contrast this with modern therapy's isolated introspection. African traditions insist healing happens in relationship, not in isolation. Even joyous celebrations like the Igbo Owu festival unite living and dead, with masked dancers embodying ancestral spirits who bless, chastise, or tease their descendants. Modern science is catching up to what these traditions have long understood. Studies show collective rituals synchronize heart rates and brain waves among participants, fostering empathy. The rhythmic drumming central to many ceremonies. It triggers the release of endorphins, literally weaving communal bonds at a biochemical level. Meanwhile, genealogists now acknowledge how oral histories preserved through ancestor veneration often align with archaeological findings, proof that myth can be meticulous memory. At its core, this spirituality challenges the West's obsession with the nuclear self. Where individualism prizes personal autonomy, African traditions assert that no one exists in isolation, where all intersections in a vast web of kinship stretching backward and forward through time. In an era of loneliness epidemics and fragmented families, these ancient practices whisper an urgent reminder that true belonging means honoring those who came before while stewarding the world for those yet to be. High in China's mist-shrouded mountains, Taoist masters once pursued the ultimate rebellion against human limitation, not through conquest, but through perfect alignment with the rhythms of the cosmos. Their goal, to craft an elixir of immortality, not as a mythical potion but as a state of being. At first glance, the methods seem contradictory. Breathing exercises so slow they mimic the unborn, alongside alchemical furnaces melting cinnabar into scarlet elixirs. Yet beneath the surface lay a profound insight that longevity wasn't about defying nature, but becoming so attuned to it that the boundaries of body and spirit dissolved. The foundation was Kai, the vital breath believed to animate all existence. Taoist adepts practiced Daya, imprecise movements guiding Kai through invisible channels, a practice that would later evolve into Qigong. Texts like the Taiping Jing warned that stagnant Kai caused disease, while flowing Kai could heal wounds and even delay aging. Modern studies reveal startling parallels. Controlled breathing techniques reduce oxidative stress, a key factor in aging, while specific postures enhance lymphatic circulation. What ancient masters called cultivating internal alchemy aligns with what scientists now term cellular autophagy, the body's process of cleansing damaged cells. Then came the external elixirs, potions distilled from mercury, gold, and rare minerals. Some seekers died from toxicity, mistaking the literal for the symbolic. But the wiser practitioners understood these substances as metaphors. When Ji Hong, a 4th century alchemist, wrote of refining the golden pill, he spoke of purifying the self through meditation, ethics, and harmonizing opposing forces, yin and yang, in perfect balance. Remarkably, this philosophy seeped into Chinese medicine, where herbs weren't just chemicals but carriers of cosmic energies. Ginseng's winding roots, resembling the human form, were prized for enhancing vitality, a concept echoing the Taoist view that nature held coded instructions for transcendence. The legacy of these practices endures in unexpected ways. Traditional Chinese acupuncture follows Kai meridians first mapped by Taoist sages. martial arts like Tai Chi preserved their movement philosophies. Even the modern wellness obsession with detoxification and breathwork unknowingly channels these ancient principles. But perhaps the most enduring lesson lies in the Taoist refusal to separate physical health from spiritual awakening. Where Western traditions often divorce body and soul, these seekers insisted they were a single system, that to lengthen one's years without enriching one's wisdom was to achieve nothing at all. Their quest reveals a universal truth: the human hunger for immortality isn't just about evading death, but about dissolving the illusion that we're separate from the universe's endless flow. In a world chasing quick fixes and Silicon Valley promises of digital immortality, the Taoists whisper an older, subtler wisdom. That true timelessness begins when we stop resisting change and become the change itself. Beneath the haunting glow of the northern lights, Viking seers traced symbols in the blood-stained snow, not mere letters, but living keys to destiny itself. The Norse didn't just write with runes, they communed with them. Each angular mark carved into bone or oak carried the weight of prophecy, a sacred technology bridging Midgard's mortal realm and the gods' celestial halls. Consider the blot, a ritual so visceral it bound entire communities. When Vikings sacrificed animals at stone altars, splattering blood onto idols of Odin or Thor, this wasn't empty superstition. They believed the steam rising from fresh entrails carried messages to Asgard, while the shared feast afterward wove kinship tighter than any contract. Archaeology confirms these practices. In Denmark's Illerup Valley, weapons ritually broken and tossed into lakes weren't discards, they were offerings to the gods for victory in battles yet to come. Runes held even deeper power. Unlike modern alphabet letters, Elder Futhark symbols weren't just for communication. Cast onto cloth or carved into standing stones, they allegedly channeled forces that could heal wounds, curse enemies, or even alter fate. The Völva, Norse seeresses, performed Seidr magic by chanting runic spells in trance states, practices so intense, male practitioners risked being labeled ergi, unmanly. Yet Odin himself, the Allfather, famously hung 9 knights from Yggdrasil, pierced by his own spear, to wrest runic wisdom from the void. What's striking is how these rituals mirrored Viking pragmatism. Theirs was a world where survival balanced on a knife's edge. Fjords froze without warning. Raids could succeed or doom a clan. Runes and sacrifices weren't escapism but tools to navigate uncertainty. When longships crossed uncharted seas, runestones on board invoked Thor's protection against storms, a spiritual GPS guiding explorers from Greenland to Constantinople. Even their concept of weird fate wasn't passive. It was a tapestry being woven with every courageous choice. Modern scholars still puzzle over runic inscriptions that defy translation, hinting at encrypted magical formulas. Meanwhile, genetic tracing reveals how Viking expansion followed sacred sites. York streets align with solstice sunrises, while Iceland's parliament met where ley lines converged. Far from the horned helm caricatures, Norse spirituality blended cosmic awe with earthy grit, reminding us that for them, the sacred wasn't separate from sailing, farming, or fighting. It was the wind in the sails of daily life. Perhaps that's why these practices endure in Scandinavia today, not as museum relics, but as living traditions. Contemporary heathens still honor the old gods with blots, while rune workshops sell out worldwide. In an age of algorithms and uncertainty, the Norse answer still resonates. Face the unknown not with blind faith, but with symbols in your hands and courage in your veins. In the damp catacombs of Egypt and the hidden corners of the Roman Empire, a radical spiritual revolution was quietly unfolding. The Gnostics, seekers of gnosis or divine knowledge, weren't content with merely worshipping the gods. They insisted on becoming divine through secret rites and forbidden texts, turning spirituality into a daring quest for liberation. their goal to shatter the illusion of the material world and awaken the divine spark trapped within every soul. At the heart of their practice lay a startling claim that the universe wasn't created by a benevolent god, but by a flawed demiurge, a craftsman who'd botched creation, leaving humanity imprisoned in bodies of flesh. Salvation, then, wasn't about faith or obedience, but about knowing the truth. Hidden gospels like the Nag Hammadi texts describe initiation rituals where candidates underwent symbolic deaths and rebirths, stripping away layers of illusion to glimpse the transcendent light beyond. One text, the Gospel of Thomas, put it bluntly, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you." What set the Gnostics apart wasn't just their cosmology, but their methods. Unlike mainstream religions with public ceremonies, their rituals were intimate, often one-on, one with a teacher. Imagine a darkened chamber where an initiate, blindfolded, was led through a labyrinth of questions. Who are you? Where did you come from? Each answer peeling back another layer of worldly conditioning. Some rites involved baptism not by water, but by fire or light, symbols of irreversible awakening. Others whispered sacred vowels aaa, e, uo to vibrate the soul free from its bodily cage. The backlash was inevitable. Orthodox leaders condemned their texts as heresy, burning manuscripts and driving followers underground. Yet Gnosticism's allure persisted precisely because it democratized divinity. No priestly hierarchy stood between the seeker and the divine, only the audacity to question, to seek, to know. Modern echoes of this survive in everything from Jungian psychology, with its emphasis on individuation, to the mindfulness movement's focus on inner awareness. Even the hacker ethos questioning systems, decoding hidden truths, owes an unconscious debt to these ancient rebels. Their most radical idea, that ignorance, not sin, was the root of suffering. In an age drowning in information but starved for wisdom, the Gnostic call to wake up feels less like ancient mysticism and more like an urgent whisper from the past, one that challenges us to stop confusing the map for the territory and to seek the light no authority can give or take away. While the Aztecs dominate popular imagination, the spiritual tapestry of the Americas before Columbus was far more intricate, woven with ceremonies as vivid and diverse as the landscapes themselves. Along Peru's arid coast, the Moche civilization left behind temples painted with eerie, grinning deities and pottery depicting priests in trance states, their eyes rolled back in ecstasy. These weren't mere artworks, they were windows into rituals where hallucinogenic brews like the San Pedro cactus opened doorways to the spirit world. What's striking is how these practices intertwined with daily life. The Moche's famous sacrifice ceremony, preserved on golden vessels, wasn't just about appeasing gods, but about sustaining cosmic order. Warriors clad in jaguar pelts drank ritual concoctions before combat, believing the jaguar's spirit would lend them ferocity. Meanwhile, their temples doubled as astronomical observatories, with alignments marking the solstices, proof that spirituality and science were inseparable. Further north, the Toltecs of central Mexico cultivated mysteries just as profound. Their capital, Cholula, bristled with towering Atlantean statues, stern warriors believed to channel celestial energies. Toltec legends spoke of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god who demanded not blood but self-discipline. Their most haunting rite, the Volador ceremony, where dancers spiraled downward from a towering pole, ropes unwinding like the threads of fate, a metaphor for humanity's connection between heaven and earth. Archaeology reveals how deeply ritual permeated these societies. Moche priests buried with spondylus shells, sacred symbols of fertility, suggest a belief in rebirth. Toltec ball courts, where games reenacted myths of creation and destruction, doubled as spiritual theaters. Even trade routes carried more than goods. They spread ritual knowledge like the use of ololuqui seeds for visions, a practice spanning from Mexico to the Andes. What modern observers often miss is the pragmatism beneath the pageantry. These weren't abstract devotions. When the moch painted crops sprouting from a decapitated god's blood, they encoded agricultural truth, that life springs from cyclical sacrifice. The Toltec emphasis on dream rituals, likely a tool for problem solving where visions guided decisions from warfare to water management. These cultures didn't vanish, they evolved, their echoes lingering in traditions still alive today. The Volador dance survives in Mexican festivals. San Pedro ceremonies continue in Andean healing practices. Their greatest lesson wasn't about exotic beliefs, but about seeing spirituality as a living dialogue, one that shaped laws, art, and survival itself. In a world that often divorces the sacred from the practical, these ancient voices remind us that the divine was never meant to be locked in temples, but woven into every facet of existence. Along the stark shores of the Dead Sea, where the desert heat shimmers above cracked earth, a community of white-robed ascetics once pursued holiness with relentless discipline. The Essenes weren't just another Jewish sect, they were spiritual radicals who turned their backs on bustling Jerusalem to forge a sacred life in the wilderness. Their daily rituals read like a manual for apocalyptic preparedness: pre-dawn prayers facing the rising sun, ritual baths in stone cisterns so exacting a single impure thought could invalidate them, and communal meals where bread and wine were served not by priests but by angels, or so they believed. Archaeology paints a vivid picture of their austere existence. Excavations at Qumran, their cliffside settlement, reveal inkwells hinting at scribbled devotion, mikveh baths aligned with celestial patterns, and a scriptorium where the now famous Dead Sea Scrolls were painstakingly copied. These weren't mere texts, they were survival guides for the coming divine judgment. The Essenes saw themselves as the sons of light, preparing for a cosmic showdown between good and evil. Their meticulous rituals weren't about personal piety alone, but about maintaining a collective vessel pure enough to withstand the approaching storm. What's often overlooked is how their practices bridged Jewish tradition and emerging Christian ideas. John the Baptist, with his desert preaching and emphasis on repentance, may have been Essene trained. His baptismal rites mirror their purification rituals. The scrolls' references to a teacher of righteousness persecuted by corrupt priests echo Christ's clashes with religious authorities. Even the early Christian communal sharing of goods finds precedent in Essene life, where members surrendered all property upon joining. Yet crucial differences remained. Where Christianity embraced outreach, the Essenes withdrew. Where Jesus dined with sinners, they avoided outsiders like contagion. Modern scholars still debate how directly Essene thought shaped Christianity. Some scroll passages like blessing the poor and hungry resonate with the Beatitudes, while their dualistic worldview light vs. darkness influenced later Christian theology. What's undeniable is their radical counterpoint to mainstream Judaism. In an era of temple sacrifices, they offered prayer. Amidst Roman luxury, they chose poverty. Their most enduring legacy might be the question they force us to confront. When the world seems corrupt beyond saving, do you retreat to purify or engage to transform? The Essenes' vanished voices, preserved in pottery jars for 2 millennia, whisper that spirituality isn't always measured in influence. Sometimes it's the quiet discipline of preparing, watching, and remaining untainted while waiting for the dawn. Their scrolls endure not just as historical artifacts, but as provocations to examine what we're willing to renounce in pursuit of the sacred. High in the Himalayas, where thin air hums with sacred syllables, Tibetan monks engage in rituals that would baffle most outsiders, chanting over intricate sand paintings, visualizing themselves as wrathful deities, even using intimate union as a spiritual accelerator. This isn't folklore, it's Vajrayana Buddhism's tantric path, a radical shortcut to enlightenment that transforms desire into wisdom and ordinary perception into sacred vision. Unlike Theravada's gradual meditation or Zen's sudden awakening, Vajrayana, the diamond vehicle, operates like a spiritual particle collider. Its methods are intense, symbolic, and fiercely experiential. Take deity yoga, where practitioners don't just meditate on compassion but become Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of mercy, through precise visualization. Every detail, the deity's lotus posture, the color of their skin, even the ornaments they wear, is engineered to rewire the practitioner's mind. Neuroscience now suggests why. Intense mental imagery activates the same brain regions as actual perception, blurring the line between imagination and reality. Then there are the mandalas, cosmic blueprints drawn in crushed gemstones or butter sculptures. These aren't mere art, they're maps of enlightenment. When monks destroy these painstaking creations after rituals, they're not vandalizing beauty but demonstrating impermanence's core truth. The most surprising tool, mantras, phrases like Om Mani Padme Hum, repeated until the words dissolve into pure vibration. Studies on rhythmic chanting show it synchronizes brainwaves, inducing states where ego boundaries soften. What sets Tantra apart is its alchemical view of obstacles. Where other paths might suppress desire or anger, Vajrayana practitioners harness these energies as fuel. Passion becomes devotion, rage morphs into fierce compassion. Even death isn't avoided but rehearsed through vow rituals, training the mind to navigate the afterlife's bardos. This isn't spirituality for the faint-hearted. It demands a guru's guidance to avoid missteps. The genius of Tantra lies in its paradox, using form to transcend form, desire to outgrow desire. While the Theravada monks might walk mindfully for decades to unravel illusion, Vajrayana's methods, when practiced skillfully, can compress that journey into vivid, transformative moments. It's a reminder that enlightenment isn't just about stripping away the world, but seeing its hidden sacredness. The modern world's fascination with ancient spiritual practices has sparked a quiet revolution, one where forgotten rituals are resurrected in yoga studios, meditation retreats, and even online courses. But this revival isn't as simple as dusting off old texts and mimicking gestures. Reconstructing lost rituals is like piecing together a shattered vase without its original blueprint. Each fragment must be handled with care, or the whole vision collapses into distortion. One of the greatest challenges lies in bridging vast cultural chasms. Take ayahuasca ceremonies, for example. Indigenous Amazonian shamans spend decades learning from elders, mastering plant diets, and navigating intricate cosmologies. Yet today, weekend retreats promise life-changing visions after a single session. The rituals may look similar, the brew, the chanting, but severed from their cultural roots, do they still carry the same meaning? Anthropologists warn against spiritual tourism, where sacred traditions become commodified experiences stripped of context. Then there's the puzzle of incomplete knowledge. Many ancient rites survive only in fragments: a sketch on a Greek vase, a cryptic line in a medieval manuscript, or oral traditions altered by centuries of retelling. Modern practitioners often fill gaps with improvisation. Norse pagans reconstructing blot sacrifices, for instance, blend archaeological finds with Icelandic sagas. But how much is historical accuracy and how much is creative adaptation? The line between revival and reinvention blurs easily. Ethical dilemmas multiply when living traditions are involved. Tibetan Buddhist monasteries guard certain tantric practices to prevent misuse, while some Native American tribes restrict access to sacred rituals like the sun dance. Outsiders eager to participate often face a painful question: does curiosity justify intrusion? Cultural appropriation isn't merely about borrowing symbols, it's about power dynamics. When dominant cultures adopt marginalized traditions without honoring their origins or struggles, the act can erase the very people who kept these practices alive. Yet reconstruction isn't inherently flawed. It can be an act of reverence. Historians working with indigenous collaborators to revive suppressed ceremonies, or linguists decoding Mayan glyphs to restore forgotten prayers, show how careful scholarship can breathe life back into the past without exploitation. The key lies in reciprocity, learning not just the how of rituals but the why, and giving back to the communities who preserved them against all odds. Perhaps the deepest lesson lies in humility. Ancient rituals weren't static, they evolved with their cultures, adapting to famine, migration, and upheaval. Today's seekers might best honor them not by fossilizing the past, but by embodying their core principles: respect for the sacred, connection to community, and the courage to transform alongside a changing world. The past whispers not instructions but invitations, to listen deeply before we speak, and to walk softly where spirits still linger. Beneath the glossy surface of modern spirituality, the meditation apps, the sound baths, the full moon circles, something ancient stirs. The poses we hold in yoga studios trace back to Vedic ascetics who sought liberation through disciplined movement. The sage smudging rituals sold at wellness shops echo indigenous ceremonies older than written history. Even the secular mindfulness movement unknowingly channels Buddhist monks who perfected breath awareness centuries ago. These aren't mere coincidences, they're proof that spiritual hunger transcends time, continually reinventing itself while clinging to timeless truth. Take yoga's journey from sacred to secular. The asanas we practice today originated as preparatory exercises for medieval tantric seekers, a way to steady the body for hours of meditation. Over time, colonial influences stripped away their spiritual context, reducing poses to physical workouts. Yet something remarkable happened. Western practitioners, initially drawn to yoga's flexibility benefits, began craving its deeper dimensions. Studios now offer chakra workshops alongside vinyasa flows, and science validates what yogis always knew, that synchronized breath and movement can rewire the nervous system. It's a living testament to how ancient practices adapt without losing their essence. Neo-paganism offers another fascinating case study. Modern witches casting circles under city skylines might not realize their rituals mirror the agricultural cycles of Celtic Druids or the kitchen witchery of medieval cunning folk. When they celebrate the 8 Sabbats of the Wheel of the Year, they're resurrecting a prehistoric understanding of time as sacred and cyclical. Yet today's pagans aren't merely replicating the past, they're reimagining it. Digital covens meet via Zoom. LGBTQ+ practitioners reclaim deities like the gender-fluid Dionysus, and eco-magic rituals address climate change. This adaptability is itself an ancient survival tactic, spirituality evolving to meet the needs of a new era. Even psychotherapy carries echoes of lost rites. Jungian analysts guide clients through active imagination, a process startlingly similar to shamanic journeying. Trauma therapies now use rhythmic drumming to regulate the nervous system, just as Siberian shamans did to induce trance. And what are vision quests if not early prototypes of solo wilderness retreats designed for self-discovery? The tools differ, but the impulse remains: to heal by reconnecting with something larger than ourselves. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in what these revivals get wrong and right. Commercialized versions often cherry-pick the aesthetic of rituals, crystals, incense, ethereal music, while ignoring their cultural contexts and ethical frameworks. Yet at their best, modern adaptations honor the core intention behind ancient practices: to bridge the visible and invisible worlds. Whether through a mindfulness bell or a solstice bonfire, we're still reaching for what our ancestors sought: a way to navigate life's mysteries with wonder rather than fear. The rituals change, but the human longing behind them remains unchanged. As our journey through these forgotten spiritual paths comes to a close, we're left with something far richer than historical curiosity. We're left with an invitation. These rituals weren't just relics of their time. They were profound conversations between humanity and the mysteries of existence, each one a testament to our enduring search for meaning. What's striking isn't just the diversity of these practices, from the hallucinogenic brews of Amazonian shamans to the precise chants of Vedic priests, but the common yearning that united them. Whether facing the uncertainty of harvests, the terror of death, or the longing for transcendence, our ancestors crafted ceremonies that turned fear into courage, isolation into connection, and the mundane into the sacred. Yet their legacy isn't confined to history books. These traditions whisper to us still, in the way a quiet walk through the woods can feel like a prayer, or how collective singing lifts the spirit in ways logic can't explain. Science now confirms what rituals intuited. That rhythmic movement can heal trauma, that communal bonding alters brain chemistry, and that awe, whether stirred by a starry sky or a cathedral's vault, expands our sense of time and purpose. So as we step back into the modern world, carrying these fragments of the past, a question lingers: how might we honor their wisdom without appropriating or diluting it? Perhaps by recognizing that spirituality isn't about recreating ancient rites exactly, but about capturing their essence, cultivating presence, fostering connection, and daring to ask the big questions with open hearts. Which of these lost practices spoke to you most? Was it the shaman's drum, the mystic's chant, or the quiet discipline of ancestors watching over their descendants? Drop your reflections below. This isn't just a comment section, but a digital campfire where stories and insights can mingle. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into humanity's spiritual roots, consider joining our community of seekers. There are always more mysteries to uncover, more threads to trace between then and now. Wherever your path leads next, may it carry the same curiosity and reverence that guided those who walked before us. After all, the most powerful rituals weren't about escaping life, they were about illuminating it. Until our next adventure, keep listening for the echoes of the old ways and stay open to the